You walk up to a $4 million haul truck at 3 in the morning and the screen is dead. Not broken. Locked. The engine runs, the tires hold air, the hydraulics are full, but a single line of code has decided your shift is over. And the only man on earth who can wake that machine back up is 200 miles away, asleep, and he bills from the moment his boots hit the truck. For years, I was the man who sold you that truck. I stood in front of mine managers and swore that Caterpillar yellow meant you would never be stranded. Then I watched European iron Liebherr, built in Germany, quietly walk into the biggest mines on this planet and take them, because those builders refused to construct the trap I was paid to sell. I spent 11 years inside a Caterpillar mining dealership. I signed the service invoices. I carried the factory passwords on a laptop in my truck. Before we finish, I am going to show you a federal report published in May of 2021, a document I promised Caterpillar's lawyers hope no working man would ever read, and it proves in plain language that the lockout was never about protecting you or your crew. And if you already run yellow iron in your yard right now, do not click away, because the last thing I tell you is something you can start doing this week to take the leash off a machine you already paid for. Let me take you back to how the loyalty got built, because it did not start as a trap. It started as the best promise in the business. When I hired on, the pitch was simple, and honestly, it was true at first. You buy the machine, and you buy the dealer behind it. Break down in the middle of a night shift in the high desert, and a service truck rolls before sunrise. That network was the whole reason mines paid a premium for the yellow paint. I believed it. I sold it hard, because I had seen it save a coal operation in the Powder River Basin a full week of production when a competitor's dealer left them waiting on a part from overseas. That was the golden age of the promise. A hydraulic pump failed, you called your rep, a rebuilt unit showed up, and a mechanic your crew knew by first name bolted it in. You owned the machine, and the dealer served the machine. The order of those two things mattered, and back then it was still in the right order. But here is the first thing I need you to understand, and it is the first crack in the story I used to tell. Somewhere in the 2000s, the machine stopped being a machine you owned and started being a subscription you serviced. The iron did not change. The steel is still magnificent. What changed was who held the key to the brain inside it. And the man holding that key was no longer you, and no longer even your favorite mechanic. It was a corporate server, and a password schedule, and a billing department that had discovered something more profitable than selling trucks. They discovered they could sell you access to the truck you already bought, over and over, for the entire life of the machine. Therefore, to understand why the biggest mines on earth are now parking European trucks next to their yellow ones, you have to understand exactly how that key got taken out of your hand. And this is the part I was never supposed to explain to you. Every modern haul truck runs on electronic control modules. Think of them as the nervous system. The engine has one, the transmission has one, the whole vital information system has one, and they all talk to each other over a network buried in the wiring harness. Now on the surface, that is progress. Those modules protect the engine, they log faults, they tell a good tech exactly what failed. I used to love them. They made me look like a genius on service calls. But sit with me on what happened next, because this is where the confession really begins. To read those modules, to clear a fault, to reflash a setting, or to change a single parameter, you need the factory software. Caterpillar calls its tool the electronic technician. Inside the trade, we just called it CAT-ET. And here is the thing the brochure never told you, and I never volunteered. For a whole category of changes that software demands factory passwords codes generated by Caterpillar itself, tied to the serial number of the module, that expire and regenerate. Picture what that means at 2 in the morning. A truck throws a derate. The engine pulls itself down to a crawl to protect a sensor reading that might not even be real. Your own mechanic, a man who has rebuilt that engine twice, plugs in and sees the fault plain as day. He knows the fix. He is standing right there with the wrench. And he cannot clear it because the machine is waiting on a password only the dealer can pull from a corporate server. So the truck sits and the meter starts. Not the dealer's meter, yours. I watched a superintendent in Nevada stand next to a dead truck for 11 hours, screaming into a phone, while 300 tons of ready ore sat behind a machine that a $9 sensor and a password would have fixed in 10 minutes. He owned that truck outright, paid cash. And he could not turn the key on his own property without permission from a building 2 states away. That is the moment my faith cracked. Because I finally understood that the software was never really there to protect the engine. Protecting the engine was the excuse. The real job of that lock was to make certain that every meaningful repair on a machine you owned had to pass through a dealer who profited from your helplessness. And once I saw it in one truck, I could not stop seeing it everywhere. And if you want the full map of how this trap was built and how to dismantle it, I have laid it all out in my book. The book is called Fixed or Owned, and the companion volume, Break the Lock, goes even deeper into the specific moves you can make right now to take back control of your own iron. Everything I learned in 11 years on the inside, everything I was told never to say out loud, is in those pages. You can find the details in the description below. Now, back to the money, because vague outrage is worthless to a man running iron. The telematics, the systems that phone home with location, fuel burn, idle time, fault history, those were sold to you as fleet management, as savings. And they do save fuel, I will not lie about that. But every one of those data streams also told the dealer more about your machine than you were allowed to know about it yourself. You paid for the sensors, you paid for the connection, and the data flowed uphill to them and came back to you only as a service recommendation with a price attached. But the software leash is only the collar. The choke comes from where that leash is anchored. And that is money, real money, the kind that bleeds a mind to death slowly enough that nobody screams until it is too late. Let me put numbers on the wound, because vague outrage is worthless to a man running iron. A large mining haul truck, the flagship class, the 360 to 400 ton machines, runs in the neighborhood of $4 to $6 million each. A big mine might run 30, 40, 50 of them. That is a fleet worth more than $250 million in trucks alone. Now, here is what nobody prices in when they sign. A single one of those trucks sitting dead in a haul cycle does not cost you the repair bill. It costs you the production behind it. Depending on the commodity and the grade, a stopped haul truck bleeds somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 for every hour it is not moving dirt. Some high-grade operations, it is far worse than that. So when a password delay turns a 2-hour fix into a 12-hour wait, you did not lose the cost of a sensor. You lost tens of thousands of dollars in ore that never left the pit. And the dealer's invoice for the visit sits on top of that like a cherry. Then come the parts. I sold them, so I know exactly how the margin is built. A genuine component carries a premium that has nothing to do with what it costs to make and everything to do with the fact that the software makes it painful to run anything else. Rebuild Programs and Caterpillar's Reman line is genuinely excellent engineering. I will give them that are structured so that the convenient path, the path of least downtime, always routes back through the dealer. You could source an equivalent part elsewhere for a fraction of the cost, but the module might flag it, or the warranty might balk, or the diagnostic might refuse to certify it, and so you pay the premium to keep the truck legal in its own eyes. I have seen mines spend more on parts and service over the working life of a fleet than they spent buying the fleet in the first place. Not double the purchase, more than the purchase, on top of the purchase. The truck was never the product. The truck was the hook. The service tail was the product, and it was designed to be longer and fatter than anyone admitted at the signing. And here is the layer that finally made me quit. The layer where someone profited from your trust turns into something uglier. The lock-in was not an accident of technology. It was a business model, defended on purpose, justified with a story about safety and reliability, and protecting the customer from himself. They wrote the terms. They built the software to enforce the terms. And they trained men like me to smile while we explained why you could not touch your own machine. But now I want to talk directly to the man who is watching this thinking, that is a fine story, but I already own the yellow iron. I am not shopping for a new fleet. I am stuck with what is in my yard, and this video is not for me. Stay with me. This next part is built for you specifically, the owner who feels the collar already buckled on, because you are not as trapped as they need you to believe. Here is the first thing, and it is the thing I was told never to say out loud on a service call. That diagnostic software, the electronic technician, and the communication adapter that connects it to the truck, those are not some sacred dealer-only relic. They exist on the open market. Independent shops run them every day. You can equip your own maintenance crew to read faults, to see live data, to diagnose your own machines, and to clear a huge share of the codes that used to force a dealer visit. The dealers let you assume the whole thing was locked. A great many of the everyday repairs never needed a factory password at all. The implication that you were helpless was doing the work the actual lock could not do. Second thing, build a relationship with an independent rebuild shop before you need one, not during a breakdown. There are shops across mining country that rebuild engines, transmissions, wheel motors, and hydraulics to specification, and they will do it for a fraction of dealer reman pricing, and they will talk to you like a partner instead of a hostage. When you have that relationship in place, the dealer's leverage collapses because his entire power came from being the only number you had at 3 in the morning. Third thing, and this is the one that costs you nothing but a phone call. Document every forced dealer visit, every password delay, every hour of downtime that traced back to a software lock rather than a mechanical failure. Write it down with dates and dollar figures, because that record is not just for your own accounting. That record is ammunition, and I am going to tell you exactly where to aim it before we are done. Fourth, when you spec your next purchase, even if that is years away, make repair access a line item in the contract. Demand the diagnostic tooling. Demand the parts documentation. Demand written terms on password access. Mines that buy 50 trucks at a time have enormous leverage and almost never use it, because the men signing were sold the same promise I used to sell. Use the leverage. Put it in ink. Because here is what the manufacturers are terrified you will figure out. The moment enough owners refuse to be helpless, the whole service revenue model that props up the premium starts to crack. And that fear is exactly why the European builders found the door wide open. So let me tell you what the Germans understood that the Americans forgot. And let me start with the truck that quietly humiliated a lot of yellow iron on the biggest jobs in the world. Liebherr, a family-held company out of Germany and Switzerland, builds a mining truck called the T282. In its later forms, it hauls right around 400 short tons, putting it toe-to-toe with the biggest thing Caterpillar makes. But the way it moves that load is the tell. It runs a diesel-electric drive, a big diesel engine spinning a generator, feeding electric motors in the wheels instead of a mechanical transmission. Fewer gearboxes to fail. Fewer of the exact mechanical choke points that used to strand a truck. Electric drive that can be serviced by people who understand electric drive, with an architecture that was not designed first and foremost to lock you out. That is not the only European answer either. Over in Belarus, the builder Bela Z produces the 75710, and this thing is almost hard to believe. It holds the world record for payload, 450 metric tons in a single truck, a record recognized by Guinness back in 2014. One machine, moving nearly 500,000 kilograms of rock in a single pass. The point is not that you are about to run out and buy a Belarusian monster. The point is that the American giant is no longer the only giant, and the world's minds have noticed. What the Europeans led with was not just size. It was a different attitude toward who owns the machine after the sale, more open drivetrains, more willingness to sell you the means to maintain your own iron, a component philosophy that treats the operator like the owner rather than the tenant. When a mine compares total cost over 15 years purchase, parts, downtime, and the price of being told no at 3 in the morning, that different attitude starts to move hundreds of millions of dollars. And money that size does not stay loyal to a paint color. I sat in meetings where the yellow team's answer to the European threat was never, let us make our machines easier for the customer to own. It was always, let us make the lock-in stickier, the data deeper, the switching cost higher. That was the moment I stopped being able to look mine managers in the eye. They were fighting to keep you dependent while the competition was competing to set you free, and they were calling the dependence a feature. But I promised you a document. I promised you buried evidence. And this is where the whole scheme gets dragged into the daylight, because I am not asking you to take the word of one bitter former salesman. In May of 2021, the Federal Trade Commission delivered a report to Congress. It was titled, and I want you to remember these words, "Nixing the Fix." It was the government's investigation into repair restrictions across industries, the software locks, the parts controls, the diagnostic barriers, all of it. And the finding, in plain federal language, was this. The Commission found scant evidence to support manufacturers' justifications for the repair restrictions they impose. Scant evidence. That is the government's polite way of saying the safety story was a story. Sit with what that means for a second. For years, men like me told you that the lockout existed to protect you, to protect the engine, to protect your crew, to keep the machine safe and reliable. And a federal investigation looked at the whole industry and found scant evidence that any of it justified taking the repair rights out of your hands. The lock was not protecting the machine. The lock was protecting the revenue. The government said so in a public document, and almost nobody in mining country ever heard about it. Now here is why that report is not just interesting history. It is the most useful thing you will hear today, and it is the piece you can act on this week. That report and the right to repair movement it fed is the reason the ground is shifting under the manufacturer's feet right now. State after state has been moving repair legislation, and the biggest crack of all came from farm country, the world closest to yours, in January of 2023. After years of pressure, a major equipment manufacturer signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation, agreeing to give owners and independent shops access to the tools, software, and documentation needed to repair their own machines. A signed agreement because the pressure finally cost them more than the lock-in earned. So here is your move, and it is simpler than they ever wanted you to know. First, equip your own people with the independent diagnostic capability that already exists on the open market so the everyday faults never leave your yard. Second, build the independent rebuild relationship now so the dealer stops being your only phone number. Third, and this is the part that turns a lone, frustrated owner into a force, take that log of forced visits and password delays and downtime dollars and put it in the hands of the people writing repair law in your state and the associations that represent operators like you. That documentation, multiplied across enough owners, is precisely the evidence that built Nixing the Fix and forced that signed farm country agreement. Your invoice is not just a bill, it is testimony. The knowledge of how to own your own machine again was never gone. It was buried under fine print and a corporate story about safety. Independent shops kept it alive in the shadows. A federal report dragged the truth into the light. Farm country turned that truth into a signed agreement, and now you have it, and you can use every piece of it on iron already sitting in your yard. I want to leave you with the thing I understand now that I could not admit while I was still cashing their checks. The machine was always yours. The steel, the engine, the $4 million you handed over, all yours. The only thing they ever truly sold you was the belief that you needed their permission to touch it. And that belief was the most expensive part you ever bought. You are the kind of man who does not rent what he owns. You come from people who fixed their own iron by lantern light because there was no one else and no other way, and something in you never signed up to ask a stranger's server for permission to work. That instinct was right the whole time. The industry just spent 20 years trying to talk you out of it. So tell me one thing, and I am asking you straight, so type it out and leave it below. What is the worst you ever got? Hit the longest. A machine sat dead in your yard waiting on a password or a dealer. And what did that downtime cost you? Name the machine, name the hours, name the number. I read every one of them, and other owners need to see they are not alone in this. And tell me where you are watching from. because I want to know which corners of this country are done being tenants on their own equipment. If you have made it this far, you are not an audience. You are part of a growing crew of owners taking their iron back, one truck, one tractor, one honest repair at a time. Follow along, because next I am going to open the thing they fought hardest to keep sealed, the real story of the factory passwords, where they come from, and the independent shops that learned to live without them. I was on the inside when that fight started. Now I am on your side of it, and I am not done talking. For years I sold you that yellow paint. Now I want to be honest with you inside the circle. This video gave you the overview, but in there I walk you through the full deauthorization for your own fleet, step by step. You can ask me about your own machines, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Thousands like you are already in there beside you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime, one click. If you enjoyed this, there's plenty more like it right here on the channel. Take a moment to subscribe and keep exploring. I've got more stories on this coming your way soon.